PhD student has accidentally uncovered a lost city in Mexico centuries after it disappeared under jungle canopy.
The Amazon rainforest. Hardly any archaeology has been done there, and yet we know from LiDAR surveys that there are enormous structures under that canopy.
Lost civilizations hit.
When the Sahara was, in a number of occasions during the Ice Age, incredibly fertile, was a kind of environment that would have nurtured human civilization. And we really can't write off the possibility of a lost civilization until we take a much closer, much more detailed look at the Sahara.
The Nabateans were an ancient civilization that lived in the deserts of what is now Jordan, Syria, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. They're probably most well known for creating the stunning city of Petra, which really has to be one of the coolest places on Earth. They were, as you can probably tell, really good at architecture. Petra, often called the Rose City, is carved into the sides of sandstone cliffs, and it's one of the most famous archaeological sites in the world, for very good reason. They weren't just about building them, they were also incredible at surviving in harsh desert conditions. They developed advanced water management systems like dams, cisterns, and channels to capture and store rainwater in the dry desert. This allowed them to live in a place that most other civilizations would have struggled to survive in. They were also skilled traders, controlling trade routes that connected Arabia, Egypt, and the Mediterranean. They traded spices, incense, and other goods, which made them incredibly wealthy. Their success was partly due to their ability to adapt to the desert environment and make use of its resources in smart ways. They didn't leave behind written records, but they did leave behind structures and tons of artwork that has helped us piece together what their culture was probably like. The ancestral Puebloans, also known as the Anasazi, were a Native American civilization that lived in the southwestern United States, mainly in what's now Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico. They're known for having built cliff dwellings and pueblos in the desert, especially in places like Mesa Verde and Chaco Canyon. Their homes were often carved right into the sides of cliffs, giving them protection from the harsh desert environment. They were also skilled architects and farmers. They lived in a dry desert, but they developed impressive irrigation systems to grow crops like corn, beans, and squash, and they also built large multi-story buildings, creating entire communities that could house hundreds of people. Their most famous site, Chaco Canyon, was a major center for culture and trade. It had grand ceremonial structures, large plazas, and roads leading in all different directions, almost like an ancient highway system of the desert. The Puebloans were also known for their intricate pottery, woven textiles, and beautiful rock art. Their culture was deeply connected to the land, with religious ceremonies tied to the cycles of nature, but by the late 1200s, they just mysteriously abandoned their cliff dwellings, and there's still some debate as to why. The Sumerians were one of the earliest known civilizations, and they lived in the deserts of Mesopotamia and what's now southern Iraq. They came about around 3500 BCE and are often credited with creating the first cities. The land they lived on was mostly dry and flat, but the Tigris and Euphrates rivers gave them the water they needed to survive. The Sumerians were also famous for developing one of the first writing systems, cuneiform. They used wedge-shaped marks on clay tablets to create everything from business transactions to religious stories, and this allowed them to keep records and pass on knowledge across generations. The Sumerians were also skilled builders, engineers, and farmers. They created irrigation systems to water their crops, which helped them turn the desert into fertile land. And they also built impressive structures like ziggurats, which are these huge stepped pyramids that were used for religious ceremonies. Their cities like Ur and Uruk were bustling with activity, with markets, temples, and palaces. The Sumerians also made huge advances in math, science, and law, but then they disappeared, and their cities were buried under layers of sand until being rediscovered in the 19th century. The Hohokam were an ancient civilization that lived in the deserts of the American Southwest, mainly in what is now Arizona, from around 300 to 1500 CE. Now, the Hohokam, that's not what they were actually called, but that's what archaeologists have named them. They're best known for their canal systems. They took advantage of the little water they had, creating hundreds of miles of irrigation canals that helped them grow crops like corn, beans, and squash in the desert. Canals were so advanced that some of them are still visible to this day, and they used the flow of water from rivers like the Salt River to channel water to their fields, and this allowed them to support large communities, even in a desert where water is obviously scarce. They lived in these large planned settlements with houses made of adobe and wood. They built platform mounds for religious ceremonies, and they were skilled in pottery, creating intricate designs that have been rediscovered by archaeologists, but Like so many other civilizations on this list, the Hohokam mysteriously disappeared around 1500 CE. The Minoans are one of the coolest lost civilizations, said by some to be the first civilization in Europe. They lived on the island of Crete in the Mediterranean around 2000 BCE. Their story is pretty fascinating because, again, they mysteriously vanished and their civilization wasn't rediscovered until the 20th century. They were advanced with their own writing system, artwork, and all these impressive palaces. The biggest one, Palace of Knossos, or what's left of it, looks like something out of a myth. I can only imagine how incredible it must have looked when it was all still there. The Minoans were traders sailing all over the Mediterranean, which helped them spread their culture and influence. And around 1450 BCE, the Minoans faded away. Some believe a massive volcanic eruption on the nearby island of Thera caused it. Could have also been invasions, but it wasn't until the early 1900s that archaeologists started uncovering the remains of their cities and palaces, piecing together their society. The Indus Valley Civilization, also known as the Harappan Civilization, is one of the most impressive ancient cultures rediscovered in the desert. This civilization lived over 4,000 years ago in what's now Pakistan and northwest India, in the desert regions near the Indus River. They were incredibly advanced, with well-planned cities, drainage systems, and standardized brick sizes. They were very organized. Their two main cities, Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, were massive, with streets laid out and neat grids. They also had sophisticated water management systems with public baths and wells, but even though we have all this evidence left behind from them, we still don't know how to read their writing system, which means we can only guess about their language and the reason for their sudden collapse around 1900 BCE. In the early 20th century, archaeologists discovered the ruins of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro buried beneath layers of earth, and today we know they were an incredibly advanced society, but there's still a lot of mystery about their culture. Next up, we have the Napta Stones, which are a series of old structures in the Nubian desert. They're around 6,000 to 7,000 years old. They were discovered by a team of archaeologists led by Fred Wendorf in the 70s. The stones are flat rocks and big stones set up in a circular formation. Some are hefty, weighing tons. Now, what these stones were actually for is still a bit of a mystery. Some think they might have been an early form of a calendar, though, and they also line up with astronomical events, which tells us that the ancient builders knew their astronomy, doing some incredibly precise measuring for the time. But we're still not sure about who set these things up. Jado is an abandoned ghost town in Niger, deep in the Sahara Desert. Found on the Jado Plateau, the ancient settlement's true name is still a mystery because no formal excavation has ever been carried out. The ruins sit on top of cliffs, and below them, hidden ponds that almost dry up in certain seasons, perfect breeding ground for mosquitoes. Jado was most likely founded by the Sao people, who were known for setting up other settlements around Lake Chad. It seems like at one time there was a bustling city here, and some think it could have been part of the Kanem-Bornu Empire from as early as the 13th century. By the 19th century, though, repeated raids by the Tuareg and the spread of malaria from cattle herding pushed people out. By the mid-20th century, only a handful of people remained, relying on date farming and salt harvesting. In 1930, during French colonial rule, a military outpost was set up nearby. Jado stayed relatively quiet until 2014 when gold was discovered in the area, so then there was a rush, attracting thousands of miners from across North Africa, but mining operations were shut down in 2017. The Norte Chico civilization is one of the most mysterious ancient societies in the Americas, located in what is now Peru. Dating back to around 3000 BCE, it might be the oldest known civilization in the Americas. The ruins have revealed some amazing finds, mainly huge pyramids and intricate irrigation systems. There's still a lot we don't know about how people actually lived though. So far, 6 pyramids have been discovered, with the biggest one being Pyramide Mayor. Now, these structures aren't as flashy as later Inca pyramids, but they're still impressive and interesting because we just know so little about the people who built them. The Norte Chico people didn't make pottery either, which is kind of unusual for ancient civilizations. Instead, they're thought to have used gourds, which of course don't last for thousands and thousands of years. There's not much art or decoration either, but it's believed they had some kind of belief in a higher power, though what exactly they worshipped is still unknown. The civilization seemed to be centered around 3 main rivers, and by 1800 BCE, the settlements were mysteriously abandoned. Well, if we're talking about incredible ancient civilizations in deserts, we can't not talk about the ancient Egyptians, right? They lived along the Nile River, but the surrounding desert played a huge role in shaping their culture. This civilization started around 3100 BCE and is known for their incredible and mysterious monuments like the pyramids and the Sphinx. The Egyptians were absolutely brilliant when it came to architecture, engineering, astronomy. They were so advanced that we're still trying to figure out how they did it all. They built massive stone structures, and their understanding of the stars helped them create a pretty accurate calendar. And the Egyptians also had just a rich culture with art, writing, religion, mummies. They created hieroglyphics, one of the earliest forms of writing, to record everything from royal orders to daily life. Their gods and goddesses like Ra, the sun god, were a huge part of their rituals and beliefs. For centuries, the desert kept their secrets hidden, but over time, archaeologists started digging up tombs, walking into these incredible temples, and finding all sorts of artifacts that we're still amazed by to this day. And even with all we've learned about the ancient Egyptians, there are still plenty of mysteries, still unexplored areas of the pyramids, and still questions and conspiracies about their technology.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have Valeriana, Mexico. We are starting off with the most recent discovery, which was just announced this week. Deep within the dense jungles of Mexico's Campeche state, a massive Maya city, lost for centuries beneath the canopy, has been accidentally rediscovered, turning our understanding of ancient civilizations on its head. PhD student Luke Auld Thomas stumbled upon this hidden metropolis, now named Valeriana, while sifting through online LiDAR data intended for environmental monitoring. Using this laser mapping technology, which reveals structures buried under thick vegetation, he uncovered pyramids, sports fields, causeways connecting districts, and amphitheaters sprawled across an area the size of Edinburgh. Dating back to 750 to 850 AD, Valeriana may have been home to 30,000 to 50,000 people, more than the region's population today. Astonishingly, this lost city lies just a 15-minute hike from a major road near Ishpuil, yet it remained hidden because the jungle had entirely reclaimed it. The discovery challenges the old notion that the tropics were inhospitable to advanced civilizations, unveiling instead a rich and complex Maya culture that thrived here, with thousands of buildings including plazas with temple pyramids and evidence of sophisticated urban planning. Valeriana offers a captivating glimpse into a world that was never meant to be found. In our number 9 spot today, we have El Mirador in Guatemala. Hidden deep within the jungles of northern Guatemala is El Mirador, an ancient Maya city that remained lost for nearly 2,000 years. Once a thriving metropolis and the capital of the Maya civilization, it housed around 200,000 people and featured monumental structures like the Ladanta Pyramid, one of the largest pyramids in the world by volume. Archaeologists like Richard Hansen have been unearthing its secrets, revealing a sophisticated society that existed centuries earlier than previously thought. The city boasts massive pyramids, intricate friezes depicting mythological hero twins, and an extensive network of causeways connecting it to other Maya sites. Isn't it astounding that such an advanced civilization could vanish into the jungle only to reshape our understanding of history when it was rediscovered? In our number 8 spot today, we have Angamuco in Mexico. Nestled in the dense forests of Michoacan, Angamuco was an ancient city built by the Purépecha civilization, which were fierce rivals of the Aztecs. Founded around 900 CE, this sprawling metropolis is thought to have been home to up to 100,000 people at its peak, making it comparable in size to modern-day cities. The city remained concealed under thick vegetation until 2007, 2007 when archaeologists stumbled upon it. But it wasn't until 2011 that the true scale of Engamuko was revealed thanks to LiDAR technology. By shooting lasers from airplanes to penetrate the jungle canopy, researchers mapped out an area covering about 26 square kilometers or 10 square miles, uncovering thousands of structures that had been hidden for over a millennium. Engamuko is astonishing for its sheer size and complexity. The city features an intricate network of pyramids, plazas, roadways, and residential areas. What's particularly fascinating is its urban planning. Unlike other Mesoamerican cities that were built around a central core, Engamuko's structures are spread out evenly, almost like a grid. This challenges previous notions about urban development in ancient civilization. Isn't it kind of mind-blowing that such a massive city, bustling with life centuries ago, could just vanish into the jungle and escape our notice until recently? It definitely makes you wonder what other secrets are still hidden beneath the trees, waiting to reshape our understanding of history. In our number 7 spot today, we have Kokhair in Cambodia. Hidden deep within the remote jungles of northern Cambodia lies Kokhair, a long-forgotten city that once served as the capital of the Khmer Empire from 928 to 944 CE. For centuries, this remarkable place was swallowed by dense forests, its temples and monuments concealed by overgrown vegetation. It wasn't until French explorers ventured into the area in the late 19th century that Kokhair resurfaced from obscurity. The site is famous for its unique 7-tiered pyramid, which stands out with its striking and unconventional architecture, unlike anything else in the region. Scattered throughout the area are numerous temples adorned with intricate stone sculptures, offering a glimpse into a brief but significant period when the Khmer capital shifted away from Angkor. While many of these artifacts were once targets of looting, they are now protected, allowing us to appreciate the distinct artistic styles and cultural innovations of that era. In our number 6 spot today, we have Calakmul, Mexico. Hidden deep within the dense jungles of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula lies Calakmul, an ancient Maya city that was once a dominant force in the Maya world. After its decline around the 10th century CE, this place was swallowed by the forest, its massive pyramids and palaces forgotten for nearly a millennium. It wasn't until 1931 that biologist Cyrus L. Lundell, while conducting an aerial survey, spotted the towering structures peeking through the canopy and brought this lost city back into the world's attention. Archaeologists have since uncovered over 6,000 structures, including some of the tallest pyramids ever built by the Maya. Calakmul was a fierce rival to Tikal in present-day Guatemala, and the discoveries here have shed incredible light on ancient Maya politics, warfare, and the complex dynamics between competing city-states. In our number 5 spot today, we have Ciudad Perdida. Hidden deep within Colombia's Sierra Nevada mountains lies Ciudad Perdida, the Lost City, an awe-inspiring ancient metropolis built by the Tairona people around 800 CE, centuries before Machu Picchu. Swallowed by dense rainforest and forgotten for over a millennia, it remained hidden until treasure hunters stumbled upon its moss-covered stone steps in 1972. The site boasts a complex network of tiled roads, terraces, and circular plazas carved into the mountainside, showcasing the Tairona's remarkable urban planning and engineering skills. Exploring Ciudad Perdida not only unveils the secrets of a civilization that thrived in harmony with nature, but also leaves us wondering how many more lost worlds are waiting to be discovered beneath the jungle canopy. In our number 4 spot today, we have the lost city of the Monkey God in Honduras. Hidden deep within a rainforest in Honduras lies the legendary lost city of the Monkey God, also known as La Ciudad Blanca or the White City. For centuries, explorers and locals spoke of this mysterious place, shrouded in myth and said to be filled with immense treasures and guarded by ancient deities. In 2015, a team of researchers made a groundbreaking discovery using using LiDAR technology, which allowed them to see through the dense jungle canopy from the air. What they found were structures hinting at a complex pre-Columbian society that had been lost to time. As archaeologists ventured into the untouched terrain, they uncovered plazas, elaborate earthworks, and a stunning cache of stone sculptures depicting animals and possibly deities, all evidence of a civilization that thrived between 1000 and 1400 CE. The discovery not only confirmed age-old legends, but also provided invaluable insights into a forgotten chapter of human history. In our number 3 spot today, we have Cuelap in Peru. Hidden high in the cloud forests of northern Peru lies Cuelap, an ancient fortress built by the enigmatic Chachapoya culture around the 6th century CE. Overgrown and concealed by dense vegetation for centuries, it wasn't until the 19th century that explorers rediscovered this monumental site. Cuelap boasts massive stone walls soaring up to 60 feet high and encompasses hundreds of circular stone buildings perched atop a mountain ridge. These architectural marvels offer a tantalizing glimpse into the lives of the warriors of the clouds, as the Chachapoya are known. The sheer scale and sophistication of Cuelap rival that of more famous sites, yet it remains one of history's best kept secrets. In our number 2 spot today, we have the secret Amazon city. Hidden for millennia beneath the dense canopy of the Amazon rainforest, an enormous ancient city has been unearthed in the Upano region of eastern Ecuador, radically altering our understanding of Amazonian history. Previously, it was believed that the Amazon was home only to nomadic tribes or small settlements. But this city, built around 2,500 years ago and inhabited for up to a millennia, tells a very different story. Archaeologists discovered an astonishing network of roads and canals connecting over 6,000 rectangular platforms, each about 20 meters by 10 meters and up to 3 meters high, arranged in groups around central plazas. Some structures, like the massive 140 by 40 meter platform at Quilamope, suggests ceremonial purposes. This sophisticated road system includes straight paths that extend up to 25 kilometers, featuring impressive right angles and engineering that managed the abundant water through canals. Nestled in the shadow of a volcano that enriched the soil, but may have also led to the society's demise, this metropolis challenges Eurocentric views of civilization by revealing a complex, interconnected urban society thriving in the Amazon. Who would have imagined that beneath the jungle's lush greenery lay a city possibly rivaling the size and complexity of ancient highland civilizations like Machu Picchu? And finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have Mahendra Parvata. Hidden deep within Cambodia's dense jungles lies an ancient city from the Khmer Empire that remained concealed for centuries. Although explorers had inklings of its existence, it wasn't until 2012 that the true extent of this lost city was revealed, thanks to archaeologists Jean-Baptiste Chavance and Damien Evans using cutting-edge LiDAR technology. This airborne laser scanning peeled back the jungle canopy to unveil an elaborate grid of temples, roads, and ponds, all dating back to 802 AD, making it about 350 years older than Angkor Wat. Founded by Jayavarman II, the city's name means Mountain of the Great Indra, referencing the sacred mountain where he was crowned the first king of the Khmer Empire. Even the French archaeologist Philippe Stern, who explored the area in 1936, only scratched the surface of its secrets.
Well, exciting news, everyone. A story about the discovery of a long-lost city in the Amazon just came out this year. Scientists have uncovered a massive ancient city hidden deep in the Amazon rainforest in the Upano area of eastern Ecuador. This place was buried under thick vegetation for thousands of years. For ages, we thought the Amazon was home to small nomadic groups or tiny villages, but this city proves that sophisticated urban societies once existed there. Professor Stephen Rothstein, who led the research, said, "This is older than any other site we know in the Amazon. We have a Eurocentric view of civilization, but this shows we have to change our idea about what is culture and civilization." The researchers used this super cool LiDAR technology, which is basically a high-tech method of scanning the ground from above, and discovered around 6,000 rectangular platforms and a network of roads and canals. One of the platforms measures 459 by 131 feet. What's also wild is that this society seemed to have been even bigger than the famous Maya civilizations in Central America. Jose Ariarte, an archaeology professor, stated, "Imagine that you discovered another civilization like the Maya, but with completely different architecture, land use, and ceramics." I mean, how cool is that? This discovery challenges everything we thought we knew about the Amazon. Professor Rothstein had apparently been warned against doing the research because many believed that no ancient groups like this lived in the Amazon, but in his own words, he was just stubborn enough to go ahead and do it anyway. They're planning to explore an adjoining area just as big, so who knows what else will be revealed in the very near future. Angkor Wat is an ancient Hindu-Buddhist temple complex found in Cambodia. Guinness World Records lists it as the largest religious structure in the entire world, so it's quite the sight. It was mostly neglected after the 16th century and wasn't known to the Western world until about 1860. When a French explorer named Henri Mahot popularized it in Europe with his travel notes, writing, "One of these temples, a rival to that of Solomon, and erected by some ancient Michelangelo, might take an honorable place beside our most beautiful buildings. It is grander than anything left to us by Greece or Rome." High praise, but then he went on to describe the locals as savages, so that kind of ruins it. Angkor Wat is pretty spectacular, but it's all that's left of what used to be a much larger city. Some say it was even bigger than modern-day New York. Now, in terms of the size of the area it covered, I'm not talking about population. At its peak, Angkor was likely home to hundreds of thousands of people, though, making it one of the largest urban centers in the world at the time. The city had an advanced irrigation system with canals and reservoirs, but over time the soil started to deplete, affecting crops and food production. Some researchers also believe droughts could have hit the region, and by the 15th century the city itself had mostly been left behind, but the temple complex of Angkor Wat was never completely abandoned. Derinkuyu is quite literally buried. It's an ancient underground city in Turkey that likely started being built around the 8th to 7th century BCE, but it wasn't fully formed until about 780 to 1180 CE, when it was used as a refuge during the Arab-Byzantine Wars, giving people shelter and protection against invasions. It's about 280 feet deep and can shelter around 20,000 people, along with their livestock and food supplies. It's an insanely cool multiple-level complex with large stone doors used to close off each floor separately, offering protection from the threats from above. It was built with wine and oil presses, stables, storage rooms, and even chapels. One room was believed to have been used as a religious school, with nearby spaces acting as studies. One of the coolest features is the deep ventilation shaft, which also worked as a well, so that the people living underground could have access to water. Derinkuyu continued being used over the centuries during various invasions, but eventually it was forgotten and lay hidden for years until a homeowner discovered it entirely by accident while renovating in 1963. They'd chased a chicken that ran into a hole in their basement only to find an entire network of underground tunnels. By 1969, parts of it were opened to the public, and today you can explore about half of this subterranean city. The Italian hilltop town of Orvieto has an entire network of underground tunnels that were kept secret for centuries. The underground city dates back to the ancient Etruscans. These early inhabitants started carving out tunnels in the volcanic rock to create wells and cisterns, and over time it evolved into a massive subterranean maze with over 1,200 interconnected tunnels and grottos. Some of the chambers contain remnants of Etruscan sanctuaries where ancient rituals took place, but these tunnels were used up until World War II and in every era in between. It was used for storage and refuge during tough times in the Roman era, the Middle Ages, and again, most recently, World War II, where parts of the underground network were used as bomb shelters. Again, the tunnels were kept secret for a long time, only made known to outsiders in recent years. Next up, we have the Özkonak underground city, again in Turkey. It's a network of tunnels carved into volcanic granite, connecting larger areas, and even has a pipe communication system that links all the different levels. It was rediscovered in 1972 by a farmer named Latif Akar, who was curious as to where all his excess water was going. He decided to investigate himself and ended up coming across this underground room. And then it was excavated, and it turned out to be a giant city that could house up to 60,000 people. Today, 4 floors of it are open to the public, but there are a total of 10 floors, reaching a depth of about 131 feet. Özkonak was built with some pretty interesting defensive capabilities too. Holes were built above the tunnels so that defenders could dump hot sand on intruders. Seems like nobody does underground cities better than Turkey, because we have another one on the list. Kaymakli. This site was first opened to tourists in 1964, and it's believed to have been built in the 8th to 7th centuries BCE, carved out of soft volcanic rock. As time went on, especially during the Byzantine era, the city expanded significantly to protect its inhabitants from raids. Kaymakli is actually connected to Derinkuyu through a network of tunnels spanning over 5.5 miles. And today, some of these tunnels are still used for storage, stables, and cellars. The tunnels are a bit different from the ones in Derinkuyu. They are lower, narrower, and more steeply inclined. The 4 floors open to visitors are designed around ventilation shafts, which were of course very important for survival underground. On the first floor, you'll find a stable and a stone door leading to a church. Lower down, you'll find a church, storage areas, kitchens, and block formations that were used for cold copper processing. Let's talk about Thonis, an ancient city that's now submerged beneath the Mediterranean Sea. This Egyptian port city was located near the mouth of the Nile River and was once a hub for trade, especially with Greece and other Mediterranean regions. Thonis was very important in ancient Egypt's economy and was filled with these grand temples and statues dedicated to gods and goddesses, but then it sank beneath the sea, and for centuries it was lost and forgotten until it was rediscovered by underwater archaeologists in 2000. And along with the remnants of the city itself, divers found these remarkably well-preserved artifacts like statues and pottery. Aktun Tunikil Mcnal, or ATM for short, is an incredible cave in Belize full of ancient Maya history. Ceramics, fascinating stoneware, and a famous skeleton have all been found here, and more. The famous skeleton in question is known as the Crystal Maiden, believed to be that of a 17-year-old boy. His bones have calcified over time, giving them a sparkling, crystallized look, hence the name. A lot of the ceramics found here have what are called kill holes, which were made to release spirits, meaning this cave was probably used for ceremonial practices. The cave is just stunning, the type of thing you'd see in an Indiana Jones movie. You'll also have a variety of wildlife here. Bats, crabs, tropical fish, otters can go here, but not on your own. Tourism is carefully managed, so you can explore it with a tour guide. Makes sense, they want to make sure the place is preserved. Plus, it can be pretty dangerous. The main cave system stretches about 3 miles long, with sections that can get pretty tight. And during heavy rain, the river level rises, in which case it's completely closed off to tourists. Now we head over to Poland to check out Wieliczka salt mine. This mine has been in use in some form since the Neolithic times, with salt production starting as early as 1044. Excavation officially began in the 13th century, and the mine kept producing table salt until 1996, making it one of the oldest salt mines in the world. The maze of tunnels stretches over 178 miles and reaches depths of about 1,073 feet deep. You can visit the place today, and it's not just a mine. There's some incredible stuff to see. There's an underground lake and chapel, and tons of beautiful sculptures, all carved out of salt. Based on the images I've seen online, the place looks like something you'd see in a sword and sorcery movie. It's amazing. During World War II, the mine was repurposed by the Germans for war-related manufacturing with forced laborers brought in to work underground. Naours is a charming little village in northern France, home to about 1,200 people, but just a short walk away, there's an ancient underground city that once housed around 3 times that number of people. The caves were hand-carved during the Middle Ages and stretch about 2 miles with over 300 rooms. The underground was built for villagers seeking shelter from invasions. It was made so that people could stay down there for long stretches of time. They built areas for livestock and water wells, and there were areas for people to gather and hang out. And here's a really cool thing about this underground city: there were bakeries. To keep the smoke from the ovens hidden, too, the chimneys were rooted through the houses above. So while the villagers baked bread down below, the invaders above would think people were still in their homes, and then would be very confused when they broke inside and saw that there was nobody there. The caves remained a secret until 1887, when they were rediscovered, and soldiers during both world wars took refuge here. In fact, you can still see graffiti and carvings left behind by Australian and British troops.
The concept of the lost continent of Lemuria was first introduced to the world in 1864 by a man named Philip Sclater, a lawyer and zoologist who divided the world into 6 main zoogeographic regions based on the distribution of animal species. These regions were the Palearctic, Ethiopian, Australasian, Nearctic, and the Neotropical regions, which was all good and well until Sclater noticed something strange: lemur fossils in India, as well as Madagascar, but not in nearby Africa or the Middle East. Seeing as identical species don't develop in 2 different places at once and lemurs can't swim, Philip theorized that the lemurs must have found their way to their various homes some other way, perhaps a large landmass or land bridge connecting Madagascar to India before eventually becoming swallowed by the seas, a landmass he later decided to name Lemuria in honor of the animals that sparked it in the first place.
So there's actually an entire school dedicated to the existence of Lemuria and what is referred to as the Lemurian philosophy. The school is found on this piece of land near Ramona, California, and is called the Lemurian Fellowship. I checked out the website, and there are some aspects to the lessons that are a bit more esoteric and seemingly inapplicable in real life. Teaching about reincarnation. One lesson called the New Order, quote, takes the student into the future some 800 years after Armageddon for a privileged visit to 3 great cities of the forthcoming civilization. Whatever that means. Guess I gotta do the full course. But the course also does outline things that are gonna be more relevant in your day-to-day life, like finances. There's a lesson devoted to marriage and family, health. This course really does cover the full gamut. Now, my first thought was that the place was gonna be a scam, but the price, it's actually pretty reasonable. $50 enrollment fee, and then $35 per lesson. There's 12 in total. Like, hey, you know what? A lot of scumbags online that offer their corrupt, get-rich-quick courses are charging just mountains more than that. So, the Lemurian Fellowship may be a little odd, but they don't seem like they're in it to swindle people to me. And there's nothing on the site about divorcing yourself from your family or friends, and you can even do the course online. So, not getting any super in-your-face culty vibes either. This sounds like an ad for the website. I'm not saying it is. I just find this kind of interesting.
In 1888, Helena Blavatsky, a Russian-American author, released a book called The Secret Doctrine, which questioned whether or not Lemuria was actually the birthplace of all humanity rather than Africa, and she put forth the idea that all major religions are united by an ancient wisdom that stemmed from an original root race in a sequence of 7 root races that define the various and concrete stages of human development. The first was the Polarian race, ethereal beings with no physical bodies. The second, the Hyperborean race, shapeless asexuals that produced through natural cloning. The third race in the sequence was the Lemurian race, who lived alongside the dinosaurs and were intelligent giants with yellowish brown skin, flattened faces, small piercing eyes, and incredibly long arms and legs. The fourth race was the Atlanteans, the inhabitants of Atlantis, peak physical structure and incredibly advanced intelligence. We are the fifth race, the expansion race, spreading out across the globe. It is Blavatsky's belief that Lemuria was destroyed by fire. Volcanoes shattered the continent into small islands, including the Hawaiian Islands, and the rest of the lands slowly sank down into the sea.
Alright, so after finishing the Lemurian Fellowship course, you may be qualified to join the Lemurian Order, the headquarters of which are also located near Ramona, California, on a piece of 200-acre property referred to as the Gateway. Enticing. The Lemurian Fellowship, the Lemurian Order, the Gateway, this all sounds very high fantasy. So what do you do once you're part of the Order? Do you seek out ancient manuscripts and battle-toad people in the woods? Based on these names, I have very high hopes. Now, from most of what I read though, the Lemurian Order specializes in crafts. Aircraft? Are they making advanced aircraft based on ancient scientific knowledge from the lost civilization of Lemuria? Well, no. By crafts, they mean like music stands. They do cabinets, wooden beakers. They make a lot of stuff out of wood. Lamps are also on the list. It's handcrafted. That's why they're called crafts, I guess. So not quite as epic as what I was hoping for, but everyone does like handcrafted stuff. You don't get a lot of that these days.
James Churchward, a British writer and inventor, also had an incredible interest in the forgotten continent of Lemuria. But after translating a number of ancient Indian tablets, he came to the conclusion that the landmass had actually once been referred to as Mu. In 1931, Churchward published his fourth book, The Children of Mu. In it, he described Lemuria as having a population of about 60 million people, and he claimed that the continent stretched all the way from Hawaii in the north to Easter Island in the east and almost all the way up to Japan in the west. In fact, later in life, Churchward stated a belief that the sunken Yonagani Monument, which we have mentioned before on this channel, might have actually been part of ancient Lemuria, and that the Nan Madol in Micronesia, which we have also mentioned before, might have been part of southern Lemuria as well. Furthermore, Churchward believed Easter Island to have been part of the landmass due to the fact that in ancient times it was home to 12,000 people, and it's highly unlikely that they would have been able to make that journey via canoe. It makes much more sense to Churchward, and starting to make much more sense to myself, and believers of Lemuria, that the inhabitants of Easter Island simply walked there instead. If they were Lemurians and therefore giants, that would also explain how they would have created the famous Easter Island megastructures. Unlike Sclater and Blavatsky though, Churchward does not believe the continent slowly sank, but rather disappeared in a single night when earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and tsunamis triggered by a pole shift swallowed Lemuria whole in just a matter of hours.
So much like Helena Blavatsky talked about with the Lemurians living alongside dinosaurs, some do go as far to say that the Lemurians were full-on reptilian beings. As for their origin, one idea is that they came from another planet and settled on Earth, establishing the great civilization of Lemuria. These reptilians are said to have lived peacefully on this part of the land for thousands of years, building a highly advanced society, and when Lemuria was destroyed, more on that later, these reptilian beings didn't just disappear, instead they went underground, both literally and figuratively. Some conspiracy theorists even claim these reptilians dug deep into the earth, creating hidden cities and tunnels to continue their existence away from human eyes.
Going off of Helena Blavatsky's point about how all major religions are united by one ancient wisdom, American authors James Bramwell and William Scott Elliott both believe that the event that destroyed Lemuria greatly mirrored the Great Flood as is described in the Bible. But rather than the flood taking place in 2348 BC, they believe it took place roughly 11,600 years ago during the Younger Dryas, at the end of the last ice age, when Earth's climate began to shift, and the planet went from being cold, frigid, and completely glacial to a little bit warmer and more interglacial. During this time, ice sheets were melting rapidly, and sea levels were rising at alarming rates across the globe. Coastal areas were completely wiped out, and entire land masses, including Lemuria, were almost completely submerged underwater.
So Lemuria is often compared to Atlantis, but as you'll learn more about in a minute, there's said to be a connection between the two, a connection that turned out to lead to their eventual downfall. But before we get to that, let's talk about Bimini Road, an underwater rock formation that some say may be the remnants of a lost ancient civilization like Atlantis or Lemuria. It was discovered in 1968, but a few decades before, it was mentioned by an American mystic named Edgar Cayce, who wrote about how a road leading to Atlantis would be discovered in the years to come, writing that, quote, "A portion of the temples may yet be discovered under the slime of ages and seawater near Bimini. Expect it in 68 or 69. Yeah, that's actually pretty wild.
So by now we've heard quite a few theories lending reasoning to why Lemuria might have disappeared so many years ago, but there is one that we have not touched upon yet, and it is my personal favorite. Why? Well, because it includes the people of Atlantis, the humanoid godlike alien race of the Anunnaki, who, according to legend, created humans through DNA manipulation and then used them as slaves in a great war between them two and the Lemurians. According to Daniel W. Fry, Atlanteans lived peacefully for almost 200,000 years before the Anunnaki came to Earth and began influencing and corrupting their society. It was this corruption that led Atlanteans to the conclusion that it was their destiny to dominate and rule over all other existing tribes and communities on Earth. But they couldn't do it without the help of the Lemurians. Only problem was, the Lemurians didn't agree with this way of living, as they believed societies deserved the opportunity to thrive on their own. Because of this, a war broke out between the Atlanteans and the Lemurians sometime between 1004 and 9500 BC. The war was cataclysmic, and the amount of nuclear energy used in the battle caused the Earth to become unstable. The axis began to change and the Earth began to shift. At the end of the Great Battle, both civilizations had fallen and their lands had become lost to the seas. According to some, there were some survivors, Lemurian survivors, who went on to create a secret civilization that apparently still exists today in the mountains of California.
That's right, Hannah. If you want to witness the sights and sounds of the majestic ancient civilization of Lemuria yourself, you may want to travel to Mount Shasta, where there's said to be a hidden underground city. According to the legend, this subterranean world is home to the remnants of Lemuria, who took refuge there after their epic war with Atlantis. There have also been a bunch of UFO sightings around Mount Shasta, and some folks even claim to have encountered this underground city. One of the most famous stories comes from a prospector named J.C. Brown. So in 1904, while searching for gold, he stumbled on a cave that sloped down for 11 miles. And inside, he claimed to have found what looked like an entire city filled with artifacts like shields and weapons and the mummified remains of large humanoids, some towering at 10 feet tall. J.C. Brown kept his discovery a secret for years until he finally shared his story with a guy named John C. Root. John got a team together to search for this underground city, but on the day they were supposed to meet, J.C. Brown vanished without a trace and was never seen or heard from again. At one time, the Vinca civilization was one of the largest prehistoric cultures in Europe. They were around for about 1,500 years, from about 5500 BCE to 4000 BC. They were in parts of what is now Serbia and Romania. The civilization is named after the village of Vinca and the Danube River, where some of the biggest archaeological discoveries were made in the 20th century. The Vinca people had advanced metalworking skills, especially when it came to copper. They excavated the earliest known mine in Europe, and they actually may have been the first civilization in the world to work with copper. These people didn't have a fully developed writing system, but archaeologists have found examples of proto-writing, symbols and marks that don't form a language necessarily, but may have been used as a kind of early form of communication. Their society was also quite organized. Their homes were carefully planned with designated areas for waste disposal. They've also found children's toys during excavations like animal figures and rattles. The Zapotec civilization, ever heard of them? They're usually overshadowed by the more famous Aztecs and Maya, but they were one of the earliest cultures in Mesoamerica. They were pioneers when it came to agriculture and developed one of the first writing systems in the region. Their biggest city was Monte Alban, built around the 5th century BCE. It was around for around 1200 years, and at its peak housed around 25,000 people. The ruling class was made up of priests, priests, warriors, and artists overseeing the lower classes, and they subjugated nearby areas, assimilating them into their civilization. What caused their decline? It's not entirely clear. Monte Alban was mostly left intact when the civilization began to fade, so it doesn't seem like there was a catastrophic event that caused the downfall. Could have been economic trouble, which caused people to up and look for work in other places. Eventually, the remaining groups split up into other city-states, which started to compete against each other, which led to the end of their culture altogether. The Hittites. These were an ancient Anatolian civilization that came about around the 2nd millennium BCE in what is now modern-day Turkey. They formed a powerful empire, reaching their peak in the mid-14th century BCE under a king named Suppiluliuma I. At the time, they controlled a large territory that included much of Anatolia and parts of northern Syria. For centuries, the Hittites were only known about through references in other cultures, mainly because their civilization had collapsed by the end of the 12th century BCE. The remnants of their empire was lost to time, and it wasn't until the 19th century that physical evidence of them was rediscovered. In 1834, a French scholar by the name of Charles Texier found what would later be known as the Hittite ruins. At the time, he didn't recognize how significant they were. In the late 1800s, though, archaeological findings at sites like Kohltepe revealed trade records mentioning the land of Hatti. Then in 1906, archaeologist Hugo Winkler uncovered over 10,000 clay tablets inscribed in cuneiform, one of the oldest known forms of writing. And these tablets revealed tons of stuff about the Hittite Empire and how it was governed, their culture, and their language. The Nabateans were an Arab civilization that lived in northern Arabia and the southern Levant. Their most famous city, Petra, is in modern-day Jordan and was a major trading hub that connected a number of trade routes across the region. The Nabateans lived between the 4th and 2nd centuries BCE and built a kingdom centered around trade, becoming pretty wealthy and influential. They were very independent, able to fend off several attempts by empires, including the Romans, to control them, but in 106 CE, Emperor Trajan annexed their kingdom into the Roman Empire. The Nabateans still managed to preserve a large part of their culture, though, which included finely crafted ceramics and very distinctive architecture, like the rock-cut buildings found in Petra. Their history dates back to at least 312 BCE, when they were first mentioned in battle reports. As they expanded, they gained control over key territories, including Damascus. Petra became quite the city, home to around 20,000 people at its height. Over time, the Nabateans adopted Greek as the dominant language, and by the 5th century, many of them had converted to Christianity. The civilization's decline began with the rise of new Arab groups, and eventually, the Nabatean culture dissipated. The Clovis people. These were an ancient group that lived in North America around 13,000 years ago. They're known for their stone tools, especially their fluted projectile points called Clovis points. The Clovers were some of the earliest known human inhabitants in North America. In 1929, a 19-year-old named Ridgely Whiteman discovered a Clovis site near Blackwater Draw in New Mexico. The site contains stone tools along with the remains of mammoths, which was evidence that there was human activity during the Pleistocene era. Before this, another big discovery happened in 1927 at the Folsom site, where the remains of a now extinct bison species were found alongside human-made tools. This was the first definitive evidence of humans in the Americas during that period. Excavations at Blackwater Draw revealed thousands of artifacts over several years, confirming the existence of a culture that relied heavily on hunting large game like mammoths. The Clovis people were highly mobile hunter-gatherers, but their culture didn't last forever. As the megafauna began to dwindle, so did the way of life for the Clovis people. That, along with the extinction of mammoths, which they may have relied heavily on for food. Çatalhöyük is a Neolithic settlement in Turkey that dates back around 7500 BC. It was rediscovered in the late 50s by James Mallart, who found these layers of buildings. Excavations showed that the settlement consisted of tightly packed mud brick houses, and there were no streets. So how did the people get around? Well, they moved around on the rooftops. Suffice to say, the architecture is fascinating and incredibly unique. Houses were accessed through holes in the ceiling, and there were no clear public buildings. They also found a ton of artifacts, from everyday tools to murals depicting hunting scenes and even human figures. People also buried their dead underneath their homes, and I briefly mentioned this before, but another really cool thing about this society was that there were no grand buildings or signs of a ruling class at all. It seems like social status was relatively equal among everyone. The people at Catalhuyuk were also into agriculture, growing grains like wheat and barley, while also hunting and gathering. The Olmecs were one of the earliest and most influential civilizations in Mesoamerica. They started to form around 1400 to 1200 BCE, but more recent discoveries may push them back even further, to about 16 to 15 BCE, thanks to findings at a site called El Manati. The Olmecs are believed to have evolved from early farming cultures in the Tabasco region dating back as far as 5100 BCE. Their first major center was San Lorenzo. Tenochtitlan, the region's fertile land, and the Coatzacoalcos River helped support a pretty sizable population, leading to the rise of an elite class that demanded fancier goods. And the elites traded for materials like jade and obsidian found in far-off places, which means they had a trade network across Mesoamerica. As time went on, San Lorenzo eventually fell apart around 900 BCE. La Venta then took the spotlight. From 900 BCE until about 400 BCE, La Venta was home to the Great Pyramid, the Mesoamerican version, of course, the largest structure in Mesoamerica at the time, which still stands today. The Olmec civilization is most famous for their massive stone heads, believed to be portraits of their rulers. Each head is unique and is adorned with distinctive headdresses. The Khmer Empire was a powerful civilization in Southeast Asia that lasted from 802 CE to 1431, thereabouts. It stretched across present-day Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, and parts of Vietnam. This empire was this blend of Buddhist and Hindu cultures, which came about after centuries of conflict. The Khmer are also best known for their incredible architecture, particularly the temples of Angkor, which are still some of the most impressive monuments in the world. And a lot of these structures are, thankfully, still in remarkably good condition to this day. But like a lot of great civilizations, the Khmer Empire eventually began to decline. As for why? Well, one possibility is that the migration of Thai people slowly encroached on Khmer territory, similar to how Germanic tribes moved into the Roman Empire. This gradual takeover may have weakened the Khmer's political influence over time. Others think that constant warfare is what did them in. Another theory is that there could have been changes in the climate that messed with their agriculture. If rainfall patterns changed, the Khmer might have struggled to maintain their farms, and mass amounts of people would have had to leave. The Nabta Playa people lived in southern Egypt around 6,000 to 11,000 years ago. They were primarily nomadic, moving around in search of food and water. Eventually, some members began to settle in the area, forming a more permanent civilization. As the climate started drying out, the region transformed into a desert, which would have sucked for them, but it did help preserve a lot of the artifacts that they left behind. One of the most famous things they left behind is the stone circle of Nabta Playa, which is the oldest known astronomical site on Earth. But along with marking the seasons, archaeologists have discovered animal remains in underground chambers, meaning that rituals may have taken place here as well. Like the other ancient civilizations on this list, the Nabta Playa people eventually disappeared. Climate change played a major role in their decline, pushing them to migrate and adapt elsewhere. And finally, the Minoan civilization lived on the Greek island of Crete from around 3000 to 1000 BC. They were a distinct culture recognized as the early ancestors of later ancient Greek society. The Minoans had pretty interesting religious lives, which included animal sacrifices, big festivals, and a number of cults celebrating nature and fertility. Egyptian hieroglyphs reference the Minoans, and from this we can determine they were active traders. They were also skilled in arts, coming up with beautiful pottery and intricate frescoes, but their civilization fell away, and one theory is that it was thanks to a volcanic eruption in the nearby Santorini Islands, which could have unleashed all these devastating tsunamis and ash clouds. Another theory comes from the Greek historian Herodotus, who thought that plagues and diseases might have been the cause. But like most of the ancient civilizations on this list, we don't know exactly how they disappeared.